and we should be live. Cool. Let's see. That's the wrong link. Let me grab the agenda. Okay, yeah, hey everyone. So this is consensus layer call 144. And yeah, I think people have kind of been pretty heads down with the Pectra DevNets. That being said, there's quite a bit on the agenda today. So yeah, let's go ahead and just dive right in. First, we'll start up with Electra. And I'm not sure if there's anything to speak to around DevNet 3. I think we killed it this week, but if there are any comments to close us out there, that this would be a good time for that.
I was actually just waiting for ACDC just to confirm that I can shut it off by the end of today. Unless there's any opposition, I will proceed with it.
Anyone?
On DevNet 3, we still found a proposal issue with Grandine. I'm not sure if they want to still debug that or whether they just want to focus on DevNet 4.
That's a good question. Is anyone from Grandine on the call? Okay. Yeah, Barnabas, I would just say use your judgment. If you can't get in touch with them by the end of the day, I think it's fine to move ahead and close out DevNet 3.
Sounds good.
Cool. Okay. Otherwise, then, DevNet 4. We've all been very busy getting this ready. I think I even saw a message on Discord earlier. A good number of clients, I think, are ready to go. But I don't think we've launched the DevNet quite yet. Anyone have any more information on the status of DevNet 4?
Yeah, I just saw that Silas just joined in, so maybe we can circle back for 1 second to DevNet 3. So Silas, would you be okay if I shut off DevNet 3 by the end of today, or are you guys still debugging something regarding the non-proposals bugs?
Sorry, I just joined there. So, uh, I hope that we'll be ready. I think I mean we pass all the tests, and there could be some integrational stuff that we didn't test in Cortozis. So yeah, if we are lucky, we will be ready today. Otherwise, tomorrow.
No, the question is whether we want to keep DevNet 3 around. Are you still actively debugging on it?
Oh, sorry. I don't know. I think if you what was the outcome when you nuked the server? Was it running okay?
We can get back to that
Okay.
in
Yeah, yeah. Let's do
offline, but
offline. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But it's
Okay.
still not proposing. That's the conclusion.
Okay.
So,
Okay. We will check then.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
So yeah.
regarding DevNet 4,
Hmm.
I also have an update for that. So we have two execution layer clients working, Geth and Ethereum.js. We have a branch for Nethermind, but there seems to be some formatting bugs. And for the CL side, we have Lighthouse, Deku, Prism, and Nimbus working, and Lodestar is able to attest but cannot propose, and Grandine cannot propose.
Okay. Awesome. So wait, we've launched the DevNet, or this is just
No, no, this is just local Kurtis test.
gotcha.
We can, so I would like at least one more EL to come online, and then we can probably launch it tomorrow, possibly.
Okay. Yeah, that works for me. Um, cool. Any ELs on the call who aren't quite ready, but maybe you could speak to readiness by tomorrow?
Wraith is not quite ready, but I'll sprint on getting it ready today so we can launch tomorrow.
Cool. Yeah, I think that would be nice. Just to have a week or two of DevNet 4. We did also want to have like a public test net based on DevNet 4 for DEF CON, so the deadline's approaching. Cool. But yeah, it sounds like there's been a lot of great progress on DevNet 4 with the various implementations. So that's really cool to see. And yeah, everyone just keep at it. Anything else on DevNet 4? Yeah, just to reiterate, it sounds like we'll aim for a launch tomorrow, pending, yeah, another one or two ELs who can join. Any
Yeah,
other?
and we can always just add them later on as well.
Hmm.
Just make some deposits and include them.
Hmm. Definitely. Cool. Any other comments on DevNet 4? Okay. If not, then we can move on to a number of other things. So at this point, yeah, I'd effectively want to think about, how do we get to a feature complete Pectra? So, we can start thinking about mainnet down the line. There are a number of open issues that we still have. Every call there are fewer and fewer, which is also good to see. One of them here is this PR 3900, and this was a refactor to some of the attestation work. We had discussed this last call and basically said, there are some like nice security benefits here. It's also possible that implementation wise, because of how core the attestation type is, this could be a lot of code change for clients. So we're going to give it another cycle to kind of assess that a little bit better and then make a call on this change. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely grounds to have this as an update for EIP 7549. I always get that mixed up with PeerDOS. But yeah, so I guess any other CL teams here have you had time to look at this or think about this? Um, I think the PR is pretty much ready to merge. We just need to agree that we want to move ahead with it. Yeah, Enrico?
Yeah, I think like last message from that lion in the attestation PR is kind of a good point to me. And considering that we had our spec implementation, it kind of um, says to us that is doable. A quick implementation of that doesn't really impact anything. It's not very nice currently, but we could go through, in that direction for sure. But essentially, what the appliance says is that the DOS attack that is supposed to be blocked is not is a problem that remains there anyway, which is kind of weird. And to me, is something like this, and is an argument that convinced me. I don't know if anyone has thought about it, and if this is true, probably makes the entire change worthless. Do you think, guys?
Right. Yeah, has anyone had time to take a look? I would need to go review a little bit more myself, but I hear what you're saying. Um, I don't think Yasik's on the call, and he was pushing for this. Um, hmm. Any other CLs have any input here at the moment?
Well, basically, I would say that like the general lighthouse vibe was yeah, we didn't see the benefit of the change, so probably not worth doing for the reasons Dapline brought up.
Okay, thanks. So, right, okay. I think then I'll try to circle back with Yasik offline and get a better sense of, yeah, what he thinks in light of this recent comment. And yeah, otherwise, it does not sound like there's a ton of support to move forward. And if anything, it's one less thing for us to do. So we'll get to Pectra sooner rather than later. Um, okay, yeah. Thanks, everyone. If there's no other comments there, we can move to the next agenda item. This one was around a number of P2P changes that I think kind of came out some of the discussions from Interop earlier this year. Um, I think, a nice way to think about this is to go ahead and roll out this PR with Pectra itself. And yeah, I guess here I'm just calling it out for everyone to take a look. I don't know where we are here. There's a lot of conversation. But yeah, have any CL teams had a chance to look at this PR? Feel strongly one way or another about merging it? From what I recall, there was pretty strong support for this direction at Interop. This PR would be, I think, a pretty maybe not invasive, but somewhat substantial change to the networking layer, which I think would imply, a good bit of testing. Which again, my understanding is that the PR justifies the cost, but it's just something to think about.
If from us, we discussed that internally, and seems like this is yeah, there will be several changes to go for, and seems like a little bit um, late to target Pectra for that. It could be better to target the next one, but this was to make things mostly stable and don't add additional things to do for the next fork. It's been there for a while, and we were trying to keep Electra stable enough, and having that merged now seems like a big change.
Right. Okay. This one was also coming from Yasik, so yeah, unfortunately he's not here. But yeah, we got a thumbs up from Terrence as well. Okay. I'll try to reach out to him as well about this and get a better sense of how much he wants to push for this and on what timeline. Cool. Then next up, we have a bug fix to some of the max EB things. This is PR 3979. And I think here the ask is just to take a look. It does look like there was another issue with withdrawals handling. And yeah, as far as I know, this is a straightforward bug fix and it should be merged. So yeah, client teams just take a look if you have a moment. Oh, Mikhail's here. I don't know if you want to add anything else.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. But yeah, I don't think it's quite straightforward as you mentioned. So just take a look, please, at for the proposed fix.
Cool. Thanks. And nice find. Uh, I think we definitely need a round of testing and review around the specs. And one way to help that is to get to a stable Pectra spec. So again, I think we're migrating to that regime, and hopefully there are cycles over the next month or two to really flush out any bugs. Okay, next up, we have an issue, or at least a proposal to think about SSD support for the builder APIs. So here, let me grab a link to at least this TR here. So this kind of came out of some of the request handling that we were talking about with these execution layer requests going from the EL to the CL. And there was a lot of discussion around how do you structure these? Like, is there a JSON encoding? Is there an SSD encoding? And in any case, the same question also comes up with the builder APIs. Because then if you're a proposer going to talk to, say, some Mev builder, they have to communicate these to you as well. And the builder APIs right now go with essentially this like JSON encoding that deviates a bit from the engine API. And this point was raised as a way to kind of at least have the option for both, kind of get the best of both worlds via direct SSD support. The question here for the CL teams, at least, is that you would need to support this in your client to talk to MedBoost, and from there, there's other like infrastructural things that we need to change. But I guess the first point there is like these other players, like relays and builders, generally also support this. It's lower latency for them, which they like. And yeah, so it would make a lot of sense. The question then is though, the question then is that you need CL buy-in as well. So the proposal concretely would be to go ahead and say this is like a, sort of official part of Pectra. You would expect to have your client have support for this with the Pectra hard fork. And yeah, I think that's the context there. Anyone disagree or feel like that's unreasonable to aim for? Dustin asked, oh, someone was going to talk.
That was me.
All
I was
right.
just gonna ask. I was just gonna ask. It looks like the PR is meant to be backwards compatible. So are we expecting like relays to support um like this in a backwards compatible way, which would mean like this would actually be, like, I guess not mandatory for clients. Not that I don't think we can or will implement it, but
Right. So my understanding is that you set essentially like a header in the request that just signals you can work with this transport, and then you go from there. And yeah, the idea is to have the sort of the existing, again, this like JSON encoding, then also just the option for SSC.
okay, gotcha.
Yeah, also I think Pectra would be a good timing to address this or to test this as well. And because I think this was proposed 2 years ago already. And even though it's backwards compatible, I think having a stricter timeline maybe pushes it a bit. And yeah, CLs don't even need to implement this. But of course, if you need want to profit from the latency gains, then because we only need to implement the client side. So it's mostly important that relays and sidecar software implements this.
Right. So it sounds like there's general agreement that this is interesting. One thing we'll definitely want is support of this in MedBoost. So yeah, that's something I can work on with the relevant parties. And then separately, yeah, CL teams, just keep this on your radar. I don't think it's a huge lift implementation wise. And yeah, we can go ahead and also get the PR merged. That's a good first step. So have that into the builder specs, and then yeah, from there, let's aim to have support for this along with Pectra, and then that can be part of the Pectra testing as we move along to mainnet. Does that sound good to everyone?
There was one more question. Also, we discussed on Discord, which was basically who will profit from this latency gain. Because, I mean, Builder could just eat it up with playing timing games, for example. And then in the end, there's no real latency gain. But I think since this is also, it's in the response of the get header request and also in the when you submit the blinded block. And the main latency benefit would be in the second part when you submit the block. So, and since we have a strict timeout on the header implemented in clients, I think timing games would not be a profit from this extra latency gain.
Right. I mean, also with SSD encoding, you use less bandwidth, which will be nice in any case. And it also does harmonize with where we might ultimately want the engine API to go, which would also have an SSD transport. So I think it makes sense, even putting aside that question. Okay, I can move ahead the spec things there, and yeah, let's just keep this on our radars for Pectra. Okay, next up, I think we just generally have like a sort of notice, especially for application developers who happen to be listening. So we have this concept of generalized indice, which basically correlates to with the SSZ, again, serialization scheme that we use on the CL. There's a corresponding Merkleization scheme. There's a way to identify nodes in this Merkle tree for each type that we have on the CL, and it facilitates light clients and anything that looks like a light client. For the current purposes, it looks like the beacon state then will cross this like key number of like a power of 2, in this case 32, which basically means that the current leaf structure gets pushed down a layer, and so these like fixed numbers all change. The concern here is that if you're writing an application against these things, there's no way at the moment to be abstract to them, and so you need to also update, say, your smart contract. So yeah, I think the ask here is just to flag this. Again, if you're using things like, say, 4788, which is the parent beacon block root EIP that we've had, or yeah, different things like this. If you reason about these generalized indices in some other way in your smart contract, right now with Pectra, there will be a break and change. So um, presumably this makes sense to you. If it doesn't, you probably don't need to worry about it, but please be aware. And yeah, Mikhail, you had the comments. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I just want to add that Ethan proposed potential solution to not cross this mark this time. We could group some new fields into some logical groups based on more on request stuff like withdrawals, consolidations, and deposits. So there are going to be 3 groups, and we just put every new introduced field in one of those buckets. But yeah, from my perspective, it's kind of like more artificial, and yeah, but that's one of the potential solutions. So not introducing this break and change right now, and maybe and in the future, once we have a stable container, we'll break this thing just once, and we'll not have to deal with it after those containers are introduced. So yeah, that's one of the workaround for this problem, just to use kind of logical grouping of the new fields. But I'm kind of like personally inclined not to do anything unless there is a strong reason for that, like something is completely broken. So that's just a comment I wanted to share.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And yeah, that's a good option if it was like a huge issue. I guess it's worth reaching out to some of the, like, for example, users of 4788 and running that by them. But otherwise, yeah, it's probably good just to have this be known and move ahead as is. Because, yeah, we could think about restructuring the beacon state, but then there'll just be some more code thrash, which is not ideal.
Yeah, and
So,
basically, even though we are relying on stable containers introduced in the future, this is going to be a break and change as far as I understand. So these 4788 beacon block roots, like the applications using them will have to be updated anyway at some
right.
point in time, whether we have stable containers or whether we're just increasing the number of fields in the beacon state in the future. So in any possible way, it will happen.
Right. Okay. So next up, I suppose I just wanted to give a brief update on this breakout on EIP 2537. This is entirely an EL concern, but there was a breakout call that we had, and we kind of came back to this core question of how to structure the APIs to the precompiles. And there's a bit of a trade-off here between like user safety and essentially cost or performance with how we think about some of these features. Like if you want to get into the details, there's a notion of a subgroup check that is very important for the cryptography. But yeah, then the question is just like the right way to structure these, essentially the inputs to each precompile. So I think I'll just flag that for now. Again, if you're listening, and especially if you expect to be a user of these features on mainnet, say for example, you want to verify zero knowledge proofs that uses Curve on the chain. Also the use case of like validators and signatures. So this EIP does let you reason about validator signatures trustlessly in the EVM, which is really cool. And that all being said, yeah, please reach out if you think this concerns you. We would love input to help answer the question around the right way to structure the some of these details of the EIP. Cool. Okay, that was everything on the agenda for Electra. Any other comments about that for the moment? Otherwise, we have Pyrdos next up. Okay. Then, yeah, the blobs, our favorite Ethereum feature. So I think to get started, well, okay, even before that, I'm assuming there aren't any substantial updates with the Pyrdos devnets from what I've seen. So I believe there was a breakout this week, and yeah, I think clients have been working through maybe some syncing issues there, but otherwise, I don't think there are any um, significant updates on the DevNet status.
Nothing.
Cool. Thank you. So that being said, there are things we can think about in parallel. One of them is this PR, which pairs actually with this engine GitBlob's V1 method that has recently been merged. And there's a question around clarifying sort of the PTP spec here for an honest node. Last call, we discussed this, and essentially we got to the point that, yeah, this PR makes sense. I think the key question here being like, if you get a blob in this way, say from your local mempool, should you then treat it like you've received it from gossip from a peer, meaning that you then gossip to other nodes? So, yeah, I think at this point, everyone's in agreement on this being the right call, and so we'll go ahead and merge this. I'll bring it up now just to serve as a final call. Any comments or questions on this? Okay. Then I think we will look to merge this even later today. Cool. And then I guess, related to this, I was curious if there are implementation updates around this feature. We can think about ways to structure this where it does provide significant bandwidth savings to nodes. I know last time clients had been looking at this engine GitLab's V1, and there is a variety of different states of progress. Any clients care to give an update on this now? Yeah, Terrence?
Yeah, so we had our implementation since last week, and then we have been testing it on the wild. And I wrote a report yesterday. Let me see if I can drop into the link. But the TLDR is that the hit rate, surprisingly to me, is really well. So I was able to recover like one blob sidecar per 12 seconds over like 4 days. And that's pretty good if you really think about it, because say today that the target is 3, that's trying to assume that you can get like 33% of the blob sidecars just over the mempool. And then because of that, the import time of the block turns out to be much faster, because typically my node waits about like 100 to 500 milliseconds waiting for the block. And now that time is just basically gone, because I can import the block faster without waiting for the blob cycle over the while. And then, so that's one benefit. I did see that I have received less blob sidecar P2P message over the gossip sub, and I think that's pretty good as well. But I couldn't quantify how much bits per second or megabits per second that saving is, right? And then the last thing I observed is that because of that, I am the fastest node on the network in a way that I receive the blob the fastest. It turns out to be sending more blobs out, right? Because now it's kind of the trade-off, because I am on the other end of the spectrum, that I am in a way receiving blob the fastest. Therefore, I reduce my download bandwidth. But in parallel, since that I want to serve nodes because of that, I turns out to be using more uplink. I think that will change when more nodes have this feature. And then, yeah, that's basically my update.
Cool, thanks. Is there some way to think about throttling your use of the uplink? Assuming you get a blob from the mempool in this way?
Yeah, Lighthouse has a write-up, which I haven't reviewed. So they're thinking about a similar concept from the peer does perspective, right? So it does make sense to kind of play the trade-off fast, to kind of play the trade-off in a way that if today you're the fastest node, you kind of want to throttle your upload. So you can maybe wait a little bit before you broadcast the blobs.
Enrico?
Yeah, we implemented it and we also released it and is currently working on mainnet with Bezu correctly. We got problems with Nethermind and yeah, waiting for other EL clients to release and test. Currently, the Teco implementation, due to what Terence said, is not using it immediately when you see the blocks. So we wait at least half a second before doing this, just to avoid, yeah, to be the super fastest node, faster node that then has to publish, because actually we yeah, essentially this waiting delay is happening on the attempt to try to recover instead of recovering and then wait before publishing. So yeah, this was the first since we were pretty one of the first client implementing it, so we decided to go first in this direction. And by the way, we saw a lot of nice recovering. So we are systematically grabbing blobs from the EL, and this reduced all the attempts that Teku tried in the previous implementation through recovering via RPC. So we were historically pretty aggressive in trying to recover late blobs, and now though this thing went down a lot because we try EL first. So far so good for
Cool. Yeah, that's really exciting to hear. Okay. Anything else on that? Sounds like, yeah, progress is underway. I guess, again, I don't know if there are any ELs on the call, but yeah, the more ELs that have this implemented, the better.
I was curious, Terrence, if you know how many of the blobs during that period were expected to be seen over the public mempool, because 30% seems lower than I would have guessed, because I had the impression that 80 or 90% of blobs were coming over the public mempool.
Oh yeah, but then the problem here is that the relayer and the builder, they purposely broadcast the blob sidecar before they broadcast the block, right? So because of that, I'm sure the number would have been higher if today they do the reverse. But since that I am receiving blob sidecar first before I receive the block most of the time, it kind of it kind of mess up with the number here.
yeah, essentially he's not even trying to get it from DL because you got the blobs first, right?
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Doesn't that kind of defeat the point of this being a bandwidth saving thing, though?
Well, it does not if the stat is meaningfully different between relay blocks and home builder blocks, right? Because home builders do not do this, and we primarily want to help with the peak bandwidth for their blocks, right? So it would actually be really interesting to see that stat broken out between the two types of blocks.
And what is important is the local building here. So when the relayer is involved, it doesn't really matter because anyway they will gossip everything by themselves. But when the proposer builds locally, this is where things get interesting, and the local recover really matters.
All right. Terrence, did you have a chance to look at this in the write-up you had? The breakdown between relay blocks versus local blocks?
I do not, so I will follow up on that.
It
I
would
don't
be
know, this
interesting to
just
know.
like feels a little weird because the nodes have already done this work to get the blobs over the transaction pool, and just because the relays are sending out first, we're not able to take advantage of that work.
I also suspect that will mostly likely be the case because of the timing game. So the relayer, their incentive is basically to gossip the block as late as possible into the 4 second mark, right? So if we ask them to maybe send a blob after, then they would just presumably just censor the blob, I presume. So I think that's kind of I think that's kind of I think that's a hard one.
To be fair, what I think it will happen is that the relayer even start not sending anything over the P2P in terms of blobs, just sending the block when the majority of the network just is able to recover from the local EL. Why sending the blobs? And the EL, the CLs will anyway will anyway recover and send over the P2P the blobs, so they will do their work.
Is there a way to receive a blob sidecar header and then before requesting the full blobs from the CLP2P, ask the EL?
There isn't today. I mean, we could think about that, but it also then is going to complicate things because the delivery becomes like partial, right? Like you could have this header state, or you could have the header plus payload state, meaning the blob sidecar. Right. Well, in any case, I think this was really helpful. And yeah, if we could keep drilling into these different metrics of how this actually works live on mainnet, that would be super helpful to get a better understanding. And yeah, maybe there's something downstream, like Live Client was suggesting, to deliver these bandwidth savings with this feature.
So one point regarding that, I guess I don't have a strong view on it yet, I guess. But right now it's explicitly marked as optional, and I understand this, and I think it makes sense as introduced in this PR to be optional, because it had not been explored the way people are exploring it now. But if we continue to pursue a certain direction that is being looked at regarding increasing blob space and here's the crucial part, with the reliance, the key assumption of it is okay precisely because of get blobs, and it would not be okay without get blobs, then I would suggest that the optionality of that be reassessed.
That makes sense. Solius?
Yeah, so I'm interested in kind of implementation detail here, where when we receive blobs from P2P, this is like event driven. So whenever we receive, we just get it, and for EL we just mostly poll it. So is it so? Let's think that this optimization will be implemented. So is it the current thinking is that we just poll EL in order to get the blobs that EL has whenever we see the block, for example, or there are discussions that there may be some other way to fetch the blobs from EL.
No, I believe it's just the first path. So, I mean, one way to think about this is it's like another availability sort of avenue for the node.
Mhm.
So, you get a block and there's some blobs attached. You need to know that the blobs exist, they're available,
Mhm.
and gossip is one way, but the mempool is another. The idea being that at least currently, most blobs are in the public mempool. At least that's sort of our working assumption. The data
Mhm.
might suggest otherwise.
Oh,
But
okay.
in any case, the idea then is that you don't really need to wait for gossip from a peer. You can just go to your local mempool because, in some sense, you just already gossiped this at the EL layer. So the CL doesn't need to like wait.
Yeah, but so according to the data, it looks like if a CL block arrived, then I just ask EL once, and I should get the blobs. So there is no need for some extra, more complicated, more even-based approach here. Is it correct?
Well, the issue that just came up was an interplay between this feature and the relays and like the external pipeline. Because basically, I mean, it sounds like what was happening is that the relays send out the blobs before you even really think about this, just due to the way like the blocks and blobs are disseminated from the relay. So yeah, to the extent that we also want this, like to the extent we think this will be savings for bandwidth for all nodes, even if you're talking to relays, then we'd need to think about some refinement of the mechanism to actually let us get that, because we can't get it right now.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
And yeah, maybe just to close out the point, like we were probably mostly concerned about nodes not using the relays. So, I don't think it's necessarily a blocker, but it is an interesting interaction between these two different parts of mainnet. Cool. Yeah, thanks everyone. That was, I thought, a really helpful discussion. Next up, yeah, this one might be a pretty straightforward yes, no. The question is just whether to rebase PureDOS onto Electra. This is certainly the intent, and then it's just now a question of timing. I don't know if this came up on the breakout this week, but I believe this PR is ready to go. So it's just kind of coordinating with client teams and yeah, making sure that everyone's okay with moving ahead with this and the specs. Dustin, I'll assume you're answering yes to this question. Any other client teams want to hold off? Okay, we got to do it. That's good. Doing it. Okay, cool. Anyone not ready?
Anyone working on Pure Death ready? I think this is gonna delay the next Devnet by potentially a couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks even.
The next PureDOS DevNet.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
if we're gonna be requiring this.
Was anyone at the breakout call, the PureDOS breakout call this week?
Yeah, the general consensus was that it's better to do it sooner than later. So everybody seemed to agree with that. So that just the two branches don't get too far apart from each
Right.
other.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the major issue is I think that we don't have a stable PureDES network right now. So it's just gonna complicate things a bit more for PureDES going forward.
Right. I mean, we will have to do this at some point, and so the question is just like, yeah, do we take the pain now or later? I would lean towards merging it. Okay, how about this? I can try to reach out to different CL teams and in particular the people working on PureDOS on those teams just to do like a final check the next couple days. But yeah, otherwise, if not, then I would expect to see this merged definitely before the next ACDC. Cool. let's see, what was next? Okay. So yeah, to round out the blob segment of today's call, I believe Francis was here and even wanted to give a presentation on some of his analysis. Are you here, Francis?
Yes.
Oh,
Let me
hey.
share my screen.
Okay.
And all right. Okay, so more blobs. Um, I believe everybody, like or like most of us on this call have already like reviewed this doc. So I'll try to be quick and like just reiterate on some of the important like points, I guess. Um, so the analysis is broken into like I guess three parts. First is like why we want to like increase the blobs, and second is like what's the current problems, and then thirdly like what's the kind of like solutions to alleviate the concerns for those problems. So the first section is like why the urgency. So these two pictures I just took them from last night, and you can see that the blobs are trending towards the target, the 3 blob target already. So that comes to the first point, like the existing consumers are like continue to scale, and based on OpenMainnet have plans to increase their scale and increasing like significant increases in blob usage. For example, Base has started to increase like the gas per second from like late September, and it has increased from 10 megagas per second to 40 megagas per second as of yesterday. So a lot of those changes are kind of like eaten up by the Base scaling as well. The second point is that there are new chains trying to join and use blob space. For example, Unichain like recently just announced, and they are aiming to launch with blobs as DA later this year for their mainnet. So that's kind of another new blob like requirement. The third part would be the loss opportunities for other L2s. If they see that, okay, it's already our target and the DA is going to be super expensive, then they are probably gonna like reevaluate it and maybe go with like odd DA solutions or some other things. So I guess to quote Vitalik, we cannot afford to let the momentum slip on moving more layer 2s over to using blobs. So what are the concerns today? There are like very legit concerns about like different aspects of the network, and I think from what I gather, there are two like main concerns. The first one is that solo stakers, their proposed blocks can be like reorged due to their low upload bandwidth because they cannot gossip out their blobs and blocks like in time for them to be attested. So that's like the first concern. The second concern is that if we increase the target number, that could potentially impact the network like syncing performance, especially for the unhappy case where the network like does not finalize and everybody needs to catch up with like syncing the historical blocks, but also have to keep up to date with the chain. So there might be some added bandwidth there that might push things over the fence. So what we are trying to do is to like take a look at this like situation in terms of like block bandwidth, in terms of bandwidth from a first principle like perspective, and try to really see, okay, in the worst case scenario, what are the upload bandwidth needed to be able to fulfill the network requirement. So before that, I'd like to reiterate these things, some of the things that we are not talking about to just focus us on the like same thing, the same problems. So first, we are not going to focus about like block-based fees. We believe that it's important here, but they are kind of like orthogonal to the analysis. And with the current block market close to being saturated, we believe that the entire kind of like fee discovery will happen very, very soon. A second part is that we will not talk about like solo stakers who have MEV enabled. So this is specifically for the solo stakers who are trying to propose in that situation. So I think for this situation, there is broad community consensus that with MEV enabled, the burden of distributing blocks and blobs is offloaded to the like relayers, so not the solo stakers. And we're not going to talk about MEV timeout and fallback to local building situation because it should happen very, very rarely. And the assumption is that download bandwidth here is not the bottleneck. At least we didn't hear anybody complain about they cannot download things like in time, etc. And in most places, download bandwidth is much higher than upload bandwidth. Okay, So this is like the things that we're not going to talk about, and the things we are going to focus on is like a solo staker that does local building and tries to propose their blocks to the entire network. The true bottleneck here is basically, I think, the number 5 step, where after it's kind of like the proposer, the solo staker, like builds its own block, it needs to like gossip out both the block and blobs over the P2P layer on the consensus layer side, and it has to happen within 4 seconds of the slot to get majority attestation. And if theoretically, like this should be like a little bit faster so that like it can propagate or disseminate properly throughout the network. So with that, we have done some like first principle analysis, like we using very conservative numbers, and some of them we use the like empirical data that we observed from the network, and also using the worst case scenario data for slow to illustrate the need. So for example, for stations, like the worst case upload bandwidth we've observed is like 300 kilobytes per second, as shown like, sorry. Yes, I think it's okay. Never mind. I think it's here, like 300 like kilobytes per second for the upload bandwidth. And there are like other points that I'm not gonna go through like point by point, just in case of time. But one thing I want to call out is that for the calculation, we are using like 2 seconds of the window of transmission for the CL layers to broadcast all the things out, blocks and blobs. So some people have like mentioned that maybe 2 seconds is not enough, but the general sense of this calculation is that to showcase, okay, what are the kind of like proximate like network bandwidth we need with different blob numbers, and then we can lead to the like optimizations we have and see what are the benefits of those like optimizations. So we don't need to like actually like look at the numbers here. We just need to know that, okay, for different blobs, like the more blobs you have, the more like upload bandwidth that is required. So what can we do here to basically make it safe to increase the blob target and blob number? And I believe we've discussed extensively about the engine like get blobs v1 that is already showing like very promising results from both the lighthouse design on the peer Devnet and also from like Terence, who just did the like analysis from his like own nodes on the network, which showcases that the block import time is like much faster, and there are benefits of the reductions on like download bandwidth. And for the upload bandwidth, like I think we will like continue to monitor the network, and once more and more nodes with this new kind of like changes like being like online, then we should hopefully see that the upload bandwidth will like decrease as well. The point here with the engine get blobs v1 is that with that, the CL layers doesn't have to broadcast the blobs out during that stringent time window, thus relieving the like peak bandwidth, peak upload bandwidth they need. So if we might use that and deduct all the like CL needs to gossip out the like blobs, we can see that with 5 blobs target and 8 blobs max, the actual like peak upload bandwidth need is even lower than 3 blobs. Although like you still need to like gossip out those blobs, but it doesn't have to be like that quickly. And there are optimizations that has already been talked about like a little bit prior, basically mean that, okay, we can potentially like delay gossiping out blobs a little bit later, so that it doesn't mess up with the block gossip, and also maybe intentionally save some like block bandwidth if all the other people can get their like blobs like from their local EM pools. So the client readiness part, I've done some like search by myself. This probably is not like entirely accurate, but so for the EL side, I believe Nevermind and Besu has already done the implementation for the engine is get blobs v1. Guess has a PR ready, and Aragon hasn't implemented yet. For the CL side, what I know is that Prism and Lighthouse are about to release a new version that supports utilizing this new API. So the point here is that it seems like most of the clients are ready or almost ready. And if we make it kind of like into the hard fork, then everybody like after hard fork should have this change and should have or like potentially will have like a lot of like savings for the network bandwidth. The second point is to disable publishing. I think this is more about like Teku, and they are already releasing that already. So I'm not gonna talk about this extensively. And the third part is like implement I don't want P2P protocol messages. And from the like multiple researches that we've seen, it seems like with that we could result to like 30 to 50% like traffic reduction and some of the like latency reduction as well. But I understand that these are kind of preliminary numbers, and the results will, like we will see it on the mainnet to be sure. But these are definitely like promising like advancements, I guess. So there are like another one which is proposed by Ben Adams, I believe, and suggest that we adopt like P2P like quick, so that we will have like a better RTT latency, and I think this could be a good add as well. So with all the like improvements, I'd like to go through the like proposed options here. So we believe that with the suggested like modifications, if we take it at the face value right now, it will be safe to increase the target to 5 and max to 8 without basically increasing the load on the various like solo stakers. And also because the blobs are almost close to be saturated, it would be great to have a little bit more, like 66% more like block capacity just for the like entire to space or for Ethereum to scale as a whole until peer DAS comes into play like after Petra. And regarding the work, I believe that with the required work is like implement this one, engine get blobs v1, implement I don't want message, which are already being done mostly by all like majority of the clients. So you shouldn't add a lot of like extra work or workload on the client teams. And hopefully they could be done within like 1 or 2 weeks of time window. And with that, there are other options like we don't increase, or we just increase the like target to 4 to give a little bit more like block capacity to the network. So the actual like path forward that we want to recommend is that I think the right approach with this is like let the client teams to implement this and roll it out to the network. And then we use the real network data from mainnet to see, okay, how much bandwidth did we actually save? Let's say if we see that with this, we saved like 30% of the network bandwidth for upload link, then with the extra like blobs, it should be like on par with prior requirements or even lower, then it should be safe to like increase the blob number at that time. So the proposal is that client teams like implement the mentioned features and changes and make the releases as soon as possible. We let it run on mainnet and observe for some period of time and answer the questions like, okay, can we get more blobs directly from EL without like having to download them from the CL layer, like all sorts of like optimizations that we can do and have all the like data ready. And then if and when we observe the real benefits to the metrics we care about, which hopefully we will, then we officially commit to the change. And on the off chances that we don't see enough improvements, we fall back to just increase the target to 4. I believe that's it. Any questions, comments, or like suggestions?
Thank you. That was really great to see. There was also a lot to digest. But yeah, I mean, I think the different options you laid out at the end could be really promising paths forward. Anyone else have any feedback at the moment? There are a number of you that left comments on the doc I saw. Okay, well, so I do think this doc helps ground the conversation around like potential options for changing the blob parameters in Pectra. And otherwise, yeah, it's like you're saying, Francis, if we have a little more time to gather some data, that will help inform the decision. Oscar?
Yeah, I was just wondering. So it seems general consensus that we want to kind of make a call on this a bit later into the fork process. But I was wondering, at what point would it make sense to, if we at least think there's a reasonable chance we want to include a blob increase, that we add that to a DevNet. Ideally, I would argue for like the most ambitious version of it, say I don't know 6.9, add it to the DevNet, just so we already have kind of make sure double check that the actual kind of making the change on the technical side does not run into any issues. Obviously, that itself wouldn't give us like much data on like the real world kind of constraints, but still, would that make sense, or would we want to wait with that until we made the final decision?
I think how can we do this? Like, can we maybe like soft commit to this change, like to this increase on the call, so that we can both do it on the DevNet, like in Pectra a bit later, and also like try the changes on the mainnet to gather like information from both sides. And with that, we could like have more data and more basically informed like information to make the decision like finally.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what exactly we mean around soft committing to have this in Pectra formally, but definitely I think everyone has soft committed to, answering the question. So, from there's the question of, yeah, do we want to touch the blob accounts at all? And then if we do, there's a question of how. Barnabas brought up this comment, and 7742, I think, is generally our answer to this. Anyone feel, well, I guess one thing is, maybe just to confirm, has anyone started thinking about 7742 implementation? Or is that not really where we're at the moment? The strategy here would be to like have 7742 because it becomes far simpler to actually change these numbers. And then from there, we can think about actually changing them. Especially, I think this is more attractive if we want to think about experimenting with different numbers, say on a DevNet. My understanding is that it's really hairy to actually go and make changes to these, just given implementations today.
I think this can potentially push the hard fork back a month or even 2 months, assuming that there's not a single client that has any implementation with 7742. So if we do want to increase the blob count in Pectra, then we really need to lay on 7742.
I'm curious, is it possible to just like do a hard increase, like hard coding increase for now, and not adding like 7742, because it seems like it's not like entirely ready, and it does require extra bandwidth for like both CL and EO to implement that.
As far as I know, there's not like a single constant that needs to be bumped up, but it's like multiple different things and multiple different libraries that have to be recompiled and stuff. So it's not a very straightforward change.
Yeah, so I don't want to distract people from DevNet 4, but we could consider on the next ACDC revisiting this question around 7742, with the idea being that we are going to make some blob target or max increase in Pectra. Does that sound reasonable to everyone?
But just one last question on this. If we say that even now already, basically, if we were to start prioritizing it, it would possibly create a 1 month delay or more to the hard fork. Wouldn't that mean that like if we only think about this in 2 weeks, now we're basically adding 2 extra weeks of basically time on the critical path of shipping this if we decide to still include it into the hard fork? Like if this is the case, we should probably just make the decision as early as possible now.
Right. And so, I mean, that's the thing. Like, if a client team has time to go ahead and start with 7742 before the next call, that's great. But But again, like we should focus on Devnet 4. And this is what we had said with like this original split decision was like we focus on the core Pectra stuff. There was for very good reasons, the point made that we should really think about the blobs and Pectra as well. So we're just here at this moment in time. And yeah, I mean that seems reasonable to me. I don't think, just adding 7742 is gonna add like a 2-month delay. Don't hold me to that, but that sounds like a lot of time, especially if it's like the exclusive focus of all the different CL teams. So that being said, it seems reasonable. Because we'll launch Devnet 4 tomorrow. There might be bugs, and then it's a whole thing. So I mean, yeah. That being said, to your point, Oscar, yeah, various CL teams and EL teams, if you're listening, if you have bandwidth, like the sooner you can start thinking about 7742, the better. If you could even have it implemented in the next couple weeks, that would be amazing.
Was there syncing concerns with 7742? Because if we're being driven by the CL, we need to validate the blob limit, the blob target. Are we gonna have the same types of issues that we're having with requests when we're optimistic syncing?
Yeah, I believe we worked through these questions with the EIP already, and so I think let's see. I think we settled on having the target in the header for this reason.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I took a
Wouldn't we
stab
need
at.
both actually in the header?
Yeah, we need the max.
We need the target and the max too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does
Especially if
it
you
all-
want to have different values, not just always half of it.
Yeah. I took a stab at implementing it like a month ago, and it seems okay. It's not a one-line change by any means, but I would much rather do it than hard coding new values in. But I am curious, like from a CL perspective, how difficult it will be to drive this new API.
It seems like from the chats, people have not like really looking to like implement it, but they are down to start implementing today. So maybe we can do this async and understand a little bit more while like people are trying to implement it.
Sure. I'm just curious, like when do we cut a Pectra spec release for mainnet and we started forking testnets? Because we're talking about making this decision later, but I feel like we're right now already rushing towards wanting to fork testnets.
I guess, do we have any like observations or like objections to doing it this way? Just try to implement the 7742 and prepare Devnet for target and max increase.
Yeah, I mean, if the client team wants to correct me, please do. But my sense is that I just wouldn't want this to become a distraction with the other Pectra stuff. So like my sense would be kind of what I said. I mean, look, the other way to think about this is we can half the latency and make a decision on ACD next week. That actually might be the way to do this. And yeah, if we can get implementations, the sooner the better. I just wouldn't want this to become a distraction for the other the other Pectra stuff.
May I ask what other Petra stuff are there? Because my understanding is that Devnet 4 consists of all the EIPs, right, for Petra 8. So if today you're Devnet 4 ready, you are mostly maintaining the future set, right? Finding bugs and stuff. So now the question is that whether do we include this EIP and have a DevNet 5, or do we just cut DevNet 4 short, basically?
I expect we'll have DevNet 5. We'll launch DevNet 4, even say tomorrow, there'll be bugs that will take up some like attention to fix. But yeah, I mean, okay, like, do we want to commit to moving ahead with this today? It does
Yes.
feel like process-wise, I mean, yes, like I think we all agree, but like, yeah, like I think
Who
I
doesn't
like,
agree to include this, by the way?
well,
Because we've been talking about this
this?
EIP
What is this? It's
7742.
7742 and then a
Yeah, yeah.
commitment to change the blob count somehow, right?
Well, I would commit to 7742 and then we can discuss all the changes later on. But 7742 will be a requirement for peer test anyway. So might as well discuss about including that and then us increasing the blob limit once every client has actually implemented it.
Okay. I do think we'd want to have all the ELs also buy into this, but we could go ahead and say today, are there any CLs who are opposed to 7742 and moving that to, I think we call it scheduled for inclusion now? Okay, anyone disagree? Okay. I will assume that's unanimous consensus then. So right, if you have time, please move ahead and start looking at 7742 implementation. And I'll be sure this is on the agenda for next week. And again, I don't really expect any surprises. But then yeah, we can move ahead and yeah, just keep moving towards a blob increase for Pectra. Okay. We have a little time left, and there were some asks for another set of EIPs. Are there any other final blob points to make before we move to those? Anything with pure DOS or blobs or scaling? Okay. Cool. So there were two that were kind of related. I'll just go in the order they're on the agenda. So the first one was 7783. Right. Yeah, let me double check actually. Right. So yeah, 7783. So this was on last week's ACD call, and essentially it's just having some more structure around how the gas limit would change, assuming there was a targeting within the protocol that would raise it or lower it. Let's see, is Julio on the call?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Do you want to say more?
Um, yeah, actually, I wanted to say more in context of 7782, because this is not a CL specific EIP. I just wanted to give a small introduction. So yeah, so basically, instead of increasing gas limit in a cliff-like manner, you increase it gradually, and you can kind of pick away some of some unknowns. One of which could be, for example, if you guys remember the 413 status code error. And also, yeah, this EIP is not part of the protocol, so it's also easy to implement. It's not an hard fork. Yeah, so it's basically a counter EIP to E7782. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Next week at ECD, I will give an update on it. Here, I just wanted to present it. I don't want to waste people's time on an EIP too much here.
Cool, thanks. And yeah, I mean, this was the next one paired with this one was 7782. Let's see. I think, yeah, this is from Ben. and it looks like you're here on the call. Would you like to give us an overview?
Sure. So the idea of rather than raising blobs or gas directly, at least initially, would be to decrease the slot time from 12 to 8 seconds, which would also, in effect, increase the blob count and gas limit in aggregate. However, rather than loading any increases on a single validator by speeding up the slot time, any increases are shared between one and a bit validators. And rather than, so again, this was brought up in ACDE, but it's more of a consensus change than execution change. And I suppose one of the most important questions would be how difficult technically changing the slot time would be. One of the other benefits is for instance, based rollups, where their latency is directly dependent on layer one latency. Outside of things like doing pre-confirmations and other more complex changes. So yeah, any feedback on what changing the slot time would be?
Julio?
Yeah, so just to repeat what I said also in the last ACD about this is that probably this is a good change to have eventually because it makes the chain more lively. But by talking around with some people, especially from the distributed validator camps, they told me that this EIP is punitive because it actually still increases bandwidth quite significantly. And another concern I personally have is that it may slow down development of single slot finality, because one of the approaches being researched is basically trying to just brute force with some smart strategy of aggregating the signatures. So having lower slot times will not help there that much. Yeah, so these are just my concerns from last time at ACD. I just restated them here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just dispute a bit the fact that this is mostly a CL change. Like, yes, the change happens in CL, but the history is going to grow 30% faster. And while the performance itself is not really linked to the size of the history, because at least in Guess we moved those old blocks outside of the DB. If it's going to take more space on the disk, and a typical Guess plus Lighthouse install is like 1.3 terabyte at this point. If we start making like the chain grow faster and faster, which by the way, the chain is the biggest size hog. I think we're going to have a lot of validators out there that are going to have to upgrade much sooner than anticipated. Is it 50% faster? Like once you get there, it's 50%, but until now it's 30%. Okay, my math is probably terrible.
33. On the history growth, that's significantly decreased since blobs, because a lot of that's call data that has moved off to blobs, and they're not 444s also.
Yeah, okay, that's possible. But just I don't think we should jump into this without making some concrete measurements.
I have the measurements. I mean, I basically asked for the guys from ETH. I mean, I talked with the guys from ETH Staker, and they basically told me that whether you increase throughput of gas or not in around 6 months, validator, in order to comfortably run, we need to switch anyway to 4 terabytes. So, I mean, since you're basically, since the hardware works in power of 2, if that's gonna happen anyway, might as well just increase throughput right? Like if you don't do anything, you still increase the requirements. If you do nothing, you increase the requirements. So just make some people happy, I guess. But yeah. So that's the answer to your question. But I think this should be discussed in ACD, probably, if anything.
Is there any feedback from consensus clients?
One thing I would say is, the slot time is very critical to many, many things in the protocol and also with implementations. One concern I would have with this is that, it might sound pretty straightforward, but then ultimately has like a huge implementation load. Sort of like with the attestation EIP we have in Pectra, where, it sounds pretty self-contained, but then again, just given how critical this concept is to like the protocol and its semantics, it does, it implies like a lot of work. So yeah, I mean, I agree with others that we should, sit more with like the actual performance benefits and, weigh that against what we're actually aiming for. Um, One path forward to de-risk the like implementation question would be to, yeah, work on a DevNet or something off in parallel, just to get a sense of like how much work this would actually be. Francesco?
Yeah, just wanted to say that one thing that might not be obvious is just how much it kind of has the potential to get in the way of future changes to the CL, which might be things that we haven't agreed upon, might be even things that we haven't even talked about on ACD because they're just research at this point, but there's just like a whole bunch of things that we might potentially want to do in the future, from EPBS to ILs to all kinds of stuff that do interact with the structure of the slot a lot. And yeah, just compressing the slot might really not be good for that. I'm not saying that we can never do it, but just I think it's something that we should only do if we're in like an extremely deliberate way, like really being sure what we're doing. So if this is really about just increasing the gas limit or blob throughput and so on, then I think in the short term it would be much safer to just do that as opposed to do it in this way.
Was that helpful, Ben, in terms of feedback?
Yeah.
Or are
I
there
mean,
yeah, I guess from here, like, would there be a place to continue the conversation?
yeah, there's on ETH Magicians of a thread. And I do think it's so. I originally raised the EIP because there's been a lot of talk about changing slot times, but nobody's actually put anything down to focus and center the discussion. So sort of putting it out there as something to consider and think about. Because it does impact quite a lot of things. Base roll-ups, for instance, is one thing that seems to be seen as a more aligned roll-up, but then that has the disadvantage of being quite dependent on L1 speed compared to other types of roll-up.
Right. Okay. Any other comments on this for now? Like Clan has a question, how hard is it for CLs to change slot times in general? Which I think is a good question. And that's kind of what I was getting at, is it could be the case that, yeah, it sounds simple, but is actually more complex than it sounds. Do any CLs today have a sense of this? Like, is it as easy as just changing a constant or some configuration, or would it be, more invasive than that? Enrico says it's not simple. Yeah, Julio says it's not. which I think just lends credence to the other arguments made that, we should be very sure about this and do it very intentionally if we do it. Cool. Well, thank you. We are almost at time. There was one final thing, just more administrative. So, ACDC on November 14th, this is right in the middle of DEF CON. I would propose we go ahead and cancel that call because I think most of us will be there. I'm happy to have it if we want it. But yeah, would anyone be opposed to canceling that call, given that, yeah, most of us will be at DEF CON? And if anything, can just, yeah, chat in person or at various times through the week. Anyone opposed to that? Otherwise, I'll move ahead with canceling that one. Okay, great. Then, yeah, I think that was it for the day. Unless there are any other final comments, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Enrico, you unmuted. I don't know if you had something to say.
Just bye-bye.
Okay. Then that's that. Thanks, everyone, and I'll see you around.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.